Good morning and a warm welcome, and thank you for keeping it right here on Sunrise at Sea. You're just in time for our views where we talk about real life conversations. Now this morning we're going to be talking about puberty. Now puberty is something that most, if not all, actually all teenagers go through it. It is a stage where both boys and girls actually undergo it. It is a stage where you see body changes. It's a stage where you start to feel a certain way. It's a time even when you start to have hormonal imbalances. And we did post this question on our Twitter platform, and we asked, when is the right time to start having conversations with children about body changes, and how would you go about it? First off, let me introduce the people that I have on my panel this morning. And to my far left, of course, is none other than Agi Uwase. And right in the middle, guest appearance, is none other than Brian. Good morning. Thank you so much for being a part of Sunrise at Sea.
It's a pleasure.
It's good to have you.
Good to be here.
Especially for this particular conversation. I'm very excited. I do not know about you. So ladies, lady and gentlemen, sorry, before we go into the conversation, it's very, very important that we understand what puberty is. So the first question is, what is puberty? Now, puberty is a stage of life when the body of a child transitions into an adult body capable of sexual reproduction. Puberty is normal and healthy and part of development for both boys and girls. Now, I understand that for very many parents, having these conversations and calling a spade is very scary. However, the downside to it is that if they do not hear it from you as an authority, they will learn it off social media. And I kid you not, it is the worst thing for a child to learn about hormonal imbalances, about body change, about how they can learn to appreciate their body and take care of it. If they learn it off the media, it can, trust me, it can be very drastic. So it's better they actually hear it from you before they hear it from someone else. So gentlemen, and I'll start with you. In your capacity, in the life that you have so far lived, when do you think is the right time to start having conversations about puberty?
As early as 8. Of late, children as young as 8 years have started experiencing puberty, getting their body changes and all that. So as early as 8, I would suggest any parent should start talking to their child about puberty, because if you for too long, when they're like 14, 15, it might come late that the reactions that come with the changes in their bodies can push them to do some things that you might realize later. So if you don't start early, it might be too late for you to save something with the teenagers. Because if a child starts to grow, all those body parts that start to develop, it's not just physically, even the physiological bit of it. They develop feelings and all that. They start to realize that, oh, I can be with a boy and feel this. I can develop a crush on someone, all that. So with the reactions can come some actions that you might not like as early as 15. Yeah.
Okay. So before, Agi, you give us your response, normally puberty in girls starts when they are between the ages of 8 and 14 years old. Now with girls, parents need to talk about things such as menstruation, which is very important. However, for boys, puberty normally starts when they are between 9 and 15 years. So for boys, it's actually higher. Well, Agi, what do you have to say? When is the right time to have conversations in regard to puberty with both boys and girls?
I don't think there's such thing as the right time or the perfect time, but between the ages of 8 and 12 should be the time when when you can have open conversations with your children about the changes in their bodies. If they haven't yet had any changes, it's the time to tell them in advance so that they know what to anticipate or what to expect, especially for the girls. I think about most of the girls usually get their menses between the normal age should be, not the normal age, but most girls it's usually between 12 and above. So by 8, they should actually be in the know. And for me, I feel like it should not only just be on the girls, they should also, sit down the boys and tell them. If it's about the boys, should know that actually girls get their menses. I think that is how eventually when they see maybe a child in school getting their menses, it's not a laughing situation back at school. So that they are always in the know about what to anticipate, like I talked about earlier. And just to be ready for when the time comes. And maybe because for those who get those changes earlier, then they know how to go about them. And it's very important for me that the parent is the first person that can actually talk to their children about these changes. Just like you mentioned, if you do not tell them, they'll find it on social media. They may not even just find it on social media. They'll find it within their cliques back at school. They always talk about these things. And then others can get this information from their nannies, from the maids back at home. And you do not want to know what nannies and maids talk to children about. They may not just give them the basics. They'll go as far as giving the details that are very unnecessary, especially for a child to understand. So it's very important that parents are the first people that children get to know these things from before they learn them in school and before they get to know about them from their peers.
Okay, let's look at some of the signs of puberty. Let's start with, first of all, the girl child. Those telltale signs for someone watching this morning, and probably their parent, or even a child watching, and they need to know that, okay, I'm now into a situation where I'm experiencing puberty, where my body is changing, where my hormones are not well balanced, you know, I'm behaving a certain type of way. How can they actually tell that, you know what, I'm undergoing a stage of puberty for the girls?
For the girls,
And why are you laughing?
This is very funny. But okay, for the girls, let me see. I cannot talk about myself, but usually I think I actually did. But I think for me, because I had elder sisters, so I got to know, I really knew what was going to happen, but I did see it from my elder sisters. But usually you start to see development of breasts. There is that huge, it's not huge, but tiny lump that's in there that it's actually really hard. So you're like, what is this? And like, you do not understand it, of course. Like, I'm talking about the people who do not understand. So in that moment when you are free or when you are open with your parents, actually this comes back to parents giving their children safe space or safe environment to be able to talk to them about anything and everything. If I can tell there's a lump in my breast and I do not know what it is, maybe I'm 8 years of age, I'm able to talk to my mom. I'm like, this is what I'm experiencing, what is this? So that they tell me about it. The other thing is the menses, but usually I think because it happens between the ages of 12, they've already studied it in science. And that is in primary 4, primary 5, so you already know that you will get your menses. But yes, you may not know in that moment until you see a different color on your panties or something, and then you're like, you know what, it clicks. I think it's about time. Or maybe if you don't know, that is the point where you ask your mom, you're like, I'm seeing something very unusual, what is this? Or someone that, your guardian, that you can actually confide in. With girls, there are very few things that are with the hips, and some do not get them. Multiple people do not get them. So it's usually about the breasts. It's usually about the menses. Yeah, I think that's it for the girls.
Okay, and how about for the boy child?
It's a hard one.
Everyone I asked this morning is just laughing, guys. We're here to build the nation.
I for one, I remember we studied about it in primary. We studied about it in primary, and by P5, P6, so there's some things I expected to experience for my peers as well. So at around senior 1, senior 2, when we started having those body changes, it wasn't something like we weren't ready for. In fact, we were even excited to know that, hey, I'm going to grow big. We couldn't wait, because to some teenagers, growing those features is a sign of adulthood, and no one is excited to be an adult like a child, even though it is sometimes a scam to them. But when you got like a circumbeard coming out, you kept it like it was gold to you.
Especially, yes,
that's those who usually used
gold.
to do this. It was very irritating to look at when guys used to overdo that. Yeah.
We would have that, and then you would just keep it. The other teachers would force you to cut it, and then even other body parts would start to develop, the hairs and all, and then the chest broadens, and you just feel, yeah, I'm starting to grow into a man. But we weren't caught off guard, except maybe for those children that didn't go to school, because currently parents have left that to teachers to tell us, the young boys and girls, about puberty. And I think it's of this generation, the modern society, but initially it wasn't. There were those culture programs where the girls would go visit the bush, go meet their aunties, and then the boys would meet the uncles. Or all cultures in Africa had them. They had regiments where kids within a certain age range would hang out under the monitoring of someone older than them to guide them all through. And I think it's only this generation that has lost it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but Brian, you have only talked about the beard and you mentioned one. I mean, aren't there any other changes that
There's the deep voice. You did not talk about that. Yes.
About it.
I said all other features.
What do you mean? Okay, so, but now features, when you talk about the deep voice, does it also fall under features? Okay, so for the boys, I do realize your voice becomes deeper. Recently, my little brother, I went home, I think about 2 weeks ago, and I realized his voice was hoarse. At first I was like, Nathan, why are you faking it? Your voice will become hard when it wants to. Then he told me, actually, no, Shivan, my voice broke. Like, he now sounds like, yo, how are you? Good morning. The only difference is he has not yet grown a beard. And for someone who was watching the show, actually, someone has just sent in a response and they're asking, how long did it take to grow your beard? Did you have it instantly? Was it some of the things that you were proud of? Because they're wondering, among the changes that happen to the boys in puberty is that if you do not have a beard, first of all, at school, in my particular school, they were bullied for it. Yeah. Like, and this is the next question that we shall get into. However, Brian, please do continue.
I think I'm one of those kids that had experienced puberty so early, because by 13, 12, I had my beard coming out.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I like that you said that, because very many teenagers or very many children that undergo the stage of puberty think that all body changes are supposed to happen at the same time. Because I grew up in a school, I grew up in a society where if by the age of 10 as a girl, you had not developed breasts, no boy would want to associate with you. For the boys, they were saying that if your voice had not become deeper, no one would want to call you a man. So I like that you've mentioned the fact that, you know, at an early age, your puberty signs were already there. But for some people, again, it depends. It depends on your kind of hormones. It depends on the kind of reaction that your body goes through. It's not guaranteed. And at everyone between a period of 8 and 13, you'll have those signs and symptoms. No.
And talking about bullying, just to add on what you said, you know, you talked about when you'd have no breasts, you'd be bullied. Yeah. But also even those ones who had bigger ones, they were bullied. Oh my goodness. The words they used to call this, I cannot mention it on air. It was very bad. So I think we should actually talk about the bullying part of it and how kids can be able to go through it and maintain their sanity.
Absolutely, that's very important. So my next question would be, do you think that schools are the right channels to be talking about or even having this sex education when it comes to puberty?
Partially, when it comes to such topics, they need a one-on-one interaction. And it's very hard for schools. Imagine a class of like 50, 100 kids in one class. When is the person doing that sex education going to get time to interact with one student one by one? It needs, because they don't also experience the body changes at the same time. You find one student in the class has a deep voice, is developing a deep voice. The other one is getting a large chest. The other one is developing hips and all. And this one has not developed anything at all. So they're like, what is happening to me? So this one who is not developing anything might feel like he's abnormal, and it can affect her or him psychologically. So it needs a one-on-one interaction, not a generalized thing. And with schools, it's normally generalized. So they're not the best, but they can do something.
That does make sense. And the reason as to why I asked this particular question is because when I was doing my research for this particular conversation, I came across a tweet, and a parent was, you know, very disgruntled, and she went onto a Twitter platform, and I'll just read the tweet out. I do not like the idea that my child came back from school. She says she's a mother of 3. 2 of her little girls go to a school that she chose to leave out. And she said, I do not agree with the fact that my little girl at the age of 15 came back home and she was asking me questions of stories they had discussed during class time. I feel it is my obligation as a parent to have a sex education talk with my child and not the other way around. So some parents feel like it is a school is overstepping if you start to talk about sex education. Because if I'm reading between the lines, this parent is very disgruntled because the reason as to why they sent their child to school is to learn. Why are you busy talking to them about body changes and hormonal imbalances and educating them about sex? Aren't you actually triggering them to become even more interested in what you're talking about?
But you see, we studied these things, they're in our curricula, right? In the curriculum, that is the science, biology. We studied those things as even in primary 4, but I think they were just the basics of the body changes that come with puberty, and I think it's fine, because at the end of the day, it sets precedence for because you have to study the reproductive system at the end of the day, so you have to know these things. But some schools maybe do go an extra mile and, you know, talk about sex education, like real sex education, and telling them like, this is, you have to do this, you have to do that. Now I think that is the problem, and it goes for certain schools. They have sex books on sex in the libraries. They have, and even custodians, we used to call them matrons back in the day. You know, they would gather, especially there would be primary 5, primary 6, they would actually exclude, they would talk about if you're not in primary 5, 6 and 7, do not come to this meeting. So they would separate us. And the conversations that, because at the end of the day, would always be anticipating to reach that stage, because we want to know the conversations that go in there. And finally getting to that point, there were some conversations that they used to have with us, and you're like, this is not appropriate. Of course, back in the day, we couldn't look at it in that perspective, because we're very excited. I mean, these conversations are really exciting. If you're to remember, whenever we'd have sexual, reproductive, something like that, all those subjects, when we'd be talking about those topics, everyone would be excited in class. So yes, I think schools just have to regulate how much information in regard to sex education that they expose to kids. And also, maybe if that is a concern that a parent has, then she has to raise it with the school administration and talk about it, so that they see how to regulate that. But at the end of the day, these are things that we have to know about. Our body changes, they are very important that kids get to know about these things. And even from school, yes, it's important, because right now most children are actually in boarding school. They experience their menses. Some get their first menstrual period when they're in school. So it's actually important that they get to know, even if it's a matron or a custodian that is telling them about it, even if it's in class, because they will probably, they do have the longest time in school. So it's okay. It's okay for schools, but only to talk about the basics and not to go deep into sex education. That is not good for the kids.
Okay, so then to what extent, how much information should we be telling these children? Because even while we're advocating, okay, puberty has happened, you know, body changes are going to happen in your body, your voice is going to break, you're going to start to feel a certain way about boys. My question is, how far should we tell as parents, or as and guardians, or as people that have gone through it, so that we are not starting a fire? Because there is telling children and youth about these things, and I've seen this for some kids, when they're oblivious to what is happening and they're finally sat down and, you know, they have the sex education talk, then they start to explore. So how much information are we supposed to give or even tell?
I believe, for one, you're supposed to tell as much as you can.
Okay, what are you saying? Okay.
As much as you can,
see,
it's too much.
Some parents get complacent when it comes to their kids. They can look at them as the 5-year-olds they used to have. I was in a certain space, and this gentleman discussed about a certain pastor. He has 3 daughters, and they were all teenagers. So he was showing off with his friends, that the daughters return home early from school. They never go anywhere. They're always home. They're good girls. But that is all he was paying attention to. He thought they're really good girls. But these girls were going through changes in their bodies, and they just didn't know how to react to them. It just got shocked one day, 2 of them were pregnant.
Oops. Okay.
So if he had taken time to notice all that and tell them that, okay, my dear daughter, when you do this and this, you're going to get a bun in the oven. When you do this and this, this and this will happen. But because all he cared about was seeing them as they were, he assumed that those little girls he raised and they were still little innocent, coming back home by 6 from school straight to their home. But it doesn't take long to get pregnant. Just branch off somewhere and things happen. So if you don't tell that much information to the kids, they will be caught off guard.
That is true.
Yeah.
Aggie, you were disagreeing with what Brian had to say.
Well, now that he has explained, I get, where he's coming from when he talks about, because yes, and I actually do agree, because they actually need to know that, what, if I mess up with a boy, but it usually happens to the girls, and that's the problem. If I mess up with the boy, this and this is what happens. For me, I feel like parents should actually be very free with their children. Do not initiate the conversation. Let them initiate the conversation from what they've probably had from school, what they've read on social media, or even what they've had at home or watched on TV. Let them initiate the conversation. So if I were a parent, that is what I would do. Just create a safe space for them to know that in case they want to know about anything, you can confide in me. But of course, if they're asking about, they can talk. Kids are very, very smart and sometimes challenging. They may ask you a question as a parent and you're like, where do I start from? And they want the details of the whole process of what happens. You cannot disclose that kind of information to kids, because they're curious beings. And just like you said, as you disclose that information, they are curious. Most of them are curious to actually find out, to do it. So it's more of, just like our parents back in the day told us, if you go here, if you do this, this and this will happen. They did not really give us the nitty-gritties of everything, but they did tell us, if you mess up with a boy, this is what happens. But they did not tell us that you have to kiss them, you have to do it. They did not tell us that. So we did, well, for me, they gave me it was very little information about, so it just shouldn't be so much. It shouldn't be so much.
I'm going to respond to what you've said in there. And this is what psychologist Dennis Usbad had to say. He went to I was just reading his blog, and he went on and said that most cases, in relation to what you said, and you said, we're not supposed to tell people we're not supposed to tell the children and give them in-depth information. But he says that the reason as to why, or you actually said that the kids should be the one to initiate the conversation. And this psychologist disagrees with you. And I also disagree with you. Let me tell you something. The thing about being a child is that, especially if as a parent you've not created a safe haven where a child is able to come and talk to you, most likely they will not.
True.
They are exposed to websites such as YouTube. They are exposed to things such as TikTok. We have Facebook. We now have WhatsApp. You're able to see countless messages, videos keep popping up. We have all these social media websites around us and social media apps around us. If a child is not comfortable with talking to you about sex education, trust me, they will either get it online or they will go and ask it from someone else. And actually, he goes on to advise, and he says, I strongly advise that parents should never wait for the kids to initiate, because in most cases, when they have asked, they have already been burnt.
Maybe they are curious because they have read it somewhere.
As a parent, it is your responsibility to initiate the conversation in regards to puberty.
I'd like to cut you short for a little bit. How would I be just seated here and then I call my daughter, I'm like, are there any boys at school who are telling you anything?
Why wouldn't I?
You get my point. Why wouldn't I? Yeah. I would want that if they are in that situation where some boys are talking to them about some things, or anyone in school has mentioned something, they are able to talk to me as a mother and say, Mommy, this and this, what do I do about this? What should I do about that is what I'm talking about. It's already, they already have they already know that they can talk to me, you understand? But I don't want to be the one, what if they haven't had anything?
Let me throw some insight.
And you're biasing them.
Between the period of 2018 and 2017 and 2020, PP Global, that is Planned Parenthood Global, released a report, and they said the reason as to why so many girls are raped, the reason as to why so many boys are bullied during their puberty stage is because parents and religious leaders do not want to call a spade a spade. Sit down and have this conversation with your child. Why are you embarrassed? Right now we're having this conversation. When I began this conversation, everyone on the panel didn't even want to talk about. But you see, then we are being hypocrites, because we are saying, let's call a spade, but again, while we're telling our children about these things, you're holding back information. So what are you doing? If we are saying that we are going to educate our children about puberty, sit down, do not wait for the child to come to you. Sit down and ask him, you have developed a beard. Do you know what that is? You have a lump on your chest. Talk about these things, because there is no, as a parent, you shouldn't be embarrassed to talk to your child. If you are embarrassed, they're definitely going to be embarrassed to talk to you. I mean, a plain example. I opened the conversation. Aggie and Brian almost wanted to hide under the table. We have to call us.
No way.
But still in relation to that. So Brian, who do you think should initiate the conversation when it comes to puberty?
In this case, I agree with you. The parents have to initiate it. Because, like you said, most of the times, the kids will speak out when they're already burned. When they're already experiencing perhaps some irreversible situations like pregnancy. Yeah. So the parent has to initiate the conversation, because if you see your child is already starting to develop those features, those body changes, you're starting to see your daughter get wide hips, the behind is getting bigger, the boobs are coming out, then just know, as much as they're coming out, the inside is also changing. That daughter is able to experience that she can get feelings for someone, she can get attracted to someone. And back then, the parents had to compete with those boys in the community that would disturb girls. Right now, they're competing with a lot of things. Those boys in the community disturbing girls, and then competing with TikTok, Facebook, movies, Netflix, all that.
Maids at home.
Maids, all that. So, if the child doesn't get that from you, perhaps they're getting guided by TikTok. They're getting guided by YouTube, Facebook, all that. So, and you never know, because there's no filter of information that your child can access there. They will land on anything that will misdirect them.
Yeah.
So they will need your guidance, and it's very critical at that stage. As soon as you start to see the changes, you start to talk to them.
Yes.
Because you don't want, I have seen, it's creepy. Will Smith's wife, Jada, she confessed on some show that her grandmother taught her to do some things when she was still young.
To please herself. Just say it the way it is. That is what she says.
To please herself when she was still young.
Yeah.
But is that normal?
Definitely not normal. Why
It's
would you
not
teach a
normal.
child to please
It's not
themselves
normal.
at 13 years
So,
of age?
in some societies, they might appreciate some things which cannot apply here,
Okay.
or where you raise your kids from. You not want your kid to get sexually active, because by the time you're an adult like Jada Pickett is confessing that she was taught, and she's even affirming that it is okay to get sexually active at 9 to please yourself, how is that healthy? If you can start to do that at 9, then you can start having sex at 13, 12. So, a child watching her online, you raise your child from Uganda and is watching Jada Pickett, who is in the US, giving some information that doesn't apply to your society.
That you would have saved if you had had a rational conversation with them.
If you had started earlier. So, and I'm not thinking that most of the time, because kids look at these celebrities as their inspiration. So, it is rare for your daughter to come and tell you, Shivan, Mommy, Jada Pickett said this. Okay. Some might be open enough.
It's not hard. It's not
Some
hard.
might be open enough.
But it's not hard.
How about a situation also where your daughter has a crush on some guy, and that guy comes and talks to her? Did you talk?
I would want my daughter to
your
come
mama?
and tell me I have a crush on this guy. How can I go about this? That's what I'm talking about. For me, I feel like let kids ask. Let them ask, like, from their point. Do not give them the information, because you give the example of Jada Pickett Smith, and the grandmother is the one who initiated this conversation.
It is, yeah, she did, but is that useful information, like, to people, to really kids, someone who is 9?
That's what I'm talking about. If she probably didn't know a thing about pleasing herself or anything like that it existed. So that is where if a child has probably read something online about pleasing yourself and what, if you have created safe space for them, like you mentioned, then they will come and ask you, and then you'll chip in. But sometimes when you initiate the conversation, you're creating a bias in their mind. They probably know nothing about this.
It is your role, and this one I'll say it very strongly. I'm not a parent, however, I was raised almost, yes, both my parents are alive, but most of the time my mom wasn't around and my dad raised me. And I will tell you this, I knew about sex education as early as 6. I knew exactly in detail what it involved, what changes I would expect, and he taught me. Imagine, my dad, all the spend and taught me these things. I am proud of the way I turned out because I knew better. If he had waited for me to initiate the conversation, it was never going to happen. But anyway, for a parent watching us this morning, how should they handle their children when they're undergoing puberty?
That is, depending on the level they are, you can lay out information depending on the level.
So let's start with the boy child. Since you're representing the boy child this morning, how should a parent handle their boy when they're going through a puberty stage?
I love the way, like, the people, old people back then, how they used to do it, to take their kids to the uncles, because usually parents are shy.
You see, no. Why are you?
It is
why
wrong.
Are you
it is wrong. It is wrong.
Yes.
It is wrong. It is wrong. But usually they're shy to talk about those things. But there's a saying. Okay, I'm speaking for the boys.
Okay.
There's a saying, an African saying, that it takes a community to raise a man. So.
And what does it take to raise a woman?
No, I'm talking for the boy child.
It takes the whole village.
Okay.
I'm talking for the boy child. The woman as well, it takes a community because the aunties are all involved. So the dad may raise the kid to like 13, and then he takes the kid to the uncle, who is open, like very open. Talks about all that and is guided, the kid is guided. Actually, they would put them in, they used to call them regiments. So they would put them in regiments, take them somewhere in a village, they camp there, be there for months, and by the time the boy returns, goes there for 3 years. By the time he returns, he's a man of 18 or 17, and he knows what is going through, what is happening to him and how to deal with it. So I don't know how parents do it now because most of the work is left to teachers, and kids spend most of the time. A term, isn't it like 3-4 months?
3 months.
3 months.
Yes.
So those are 9 months at school. Parents only have 3 months with their kids, and that is not much time for them to notice everything happening around their kids and also spend enough time to talk about those things, unless they go out of their way to do that. So it is the teachers that usually do that, and I believe the sex education program is very crucial and important in schools. In that way, we can approach it in a way that can help the students, the young boys who are going through puberty, who just don't know anything, so that they're not caught off guard.
Okay.
Yeah.
So before I switch to you, Age, I'd just like to mention in regard to what Brian highlighted, the aspect of a boy or a girl reaching puberty and then you ship them off to either an auntie or uncle. My friend, you are the parent. You are the one who went to Tango and you didn't expect popcorn. Those are Sarah's words. You didn't expect popcorn. You gave birth to a boy or you gave birth to a girl. It is your responsibility as a parent to have these conversations with your child and do not shift responsibility to other relatives. That is how relatives start bad touching these children. That is how these relatives start telling children wrong information. Yes. And then you begin, I wish you knew. Now is your time. Why are you shifting your responsibility of being a parent to a relative?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, just like both of you have talked about, for me, I believe you should get this information from your parents. I did get this information from my mother, but I would understand in the event that you're probably a single father and you do not have a wife, you understand that just like you were you raised by just your father alone?
No, I have both parents.
You have both parents. But okay, in the event that there's a single father in the picture that doesn't have a wife and he lives with the kids who are probably girls, it's okay for an auntie to chip in. But it should be somebody that you trust, yes. Some men are not as, and we can only understand it. We have to understand the fact that they're probably Not well, I mean, it's different when you read the information off the internet and you are talking to me about it when you've read it, and if when you understand it or you mean what you say, you understand. So it's okay if an auntie has to chip in, but it definitely has to be someone that you trust with your child. But if you are available as a parent, if you are a family, I mean, there's a father, there's a mother in the picture. As a father, talk to your sons. As a mother, talk to your daughters. And if it's okay, there are some parents who are okay with talking to their daughters even when they are men, and they will bluntly talk about everything and anything about puberty, about changes, about sex education, then it's fine. I really do not agree with what Brian said about, you know, shipping off your kids, even if it's for a holiday. I know there's where, you know, mothers ship off their daughters to the village. Go talk to your auntie. These aunties give actually very terrible information to young girls.
Some.
Yes. Instead of talking about just the normal changes, the puberty, and how to go through the puberty stage and, you know, be successful, because there's some people who do not, you know, go through the puberty stage without getting pregnant and all the other issues. They go as deep as, just like Jada Pinkett Smith, you know, teaching these young women how to please themselves, and then how to lure men, how to attract men. Yes. Okay. Yes, aunties do that a lot. I know so many well stories that I've read on social media.
I hope your relatives are watching this morning.
Yes, because
there's something just before you chip in, Brian. There's something I feel that we are not highlighting. And I know, Aggie, you mentioned it, and you were saying, you know, even while it is a responsibility, the boy needs to talk, the father needs to talk to the boys, and then the mom needs to talk to the girls. But you see, just by doing that, we are making it seem like it's only the women that can talk to their fellow women.
No, I talked about...
Listen, what is so wrong with a man talking to the daughter? What is so wrong with a mother telling... Yes, I know the father may know more because he has experienced these changes, but also I want you to realize that it's a whole triple-down effect. Note this. There are fathers who are not comfortable with talking about certain things that their daughters will undergo. Why? Either because they don't know, or they just don't know how to explain
or maybe they don't know.
Do you know why? Because even when we're having these conversations about puberty, you will only hear one side of the story. Now today, the reason as to why I brought this conversation is because I'm advocating for this. When I sit down as a mom, and I am talking to my daughter about her puberty changes, I will also tell her about the boy changes.
Yes, that is.
So that they are both aware of the changes they're going through, because then we shall do our things like, boys are making fun of me because I soiled myself.
Yeah.
A boy will understand and say, oh, mommy told me when girls are in puberty and this is what happens. When I see a boy with a one beard, I will not bully him. Instead, I know he's turning into a man.
Yes.
These things can actually be dealt away with if we can have these conversations rationally as capable human beings and tell the truth.
You see, the reason I said that is the fact that we cannot downplay the fact that sometimes we are not comfortable as girls. Like, that's why even in school they would separate girls and boys when they're talking about certain things. When they're teaching you about how to put your pad on your panties, you understand? So yes, it's okay for the mother to put the girls aside for as long as they are not comfortable to have their brothers in the same conversation. Yes. But that doesn't deter the mother from talking to the boys about the changes that their sisters are going to experience.
That is
you understand? So yes, it's all about, because you want your child to be comfortable, in order to be free to ask you the questions that they need to ask you.
Okay.
So they have to be comfortable.
I agree with that as well, because if they are both experiencing changes, then the boy needs to know that the girls are going through this, and I'm going through this, and if we at some point do this, we shall get this.
At some point we shall get this. I don't know what Brian means, but at some point we shall do this and get this. But
in case we do it. But I thought you meant that fathers talking to that, being there for their daughters when they're going through that. In case of, let's say, single fathers, that you have your daughter going through puberty and you be there for her doing that. It's quite hard. You don't know much about body changes in women except what you were told.
Okay.
So you have to ship her to someone.
Okay.
Or bring that someone here. Why do they have to go the other side?
Anyway, as we wrap up the conversation, and before I get your last remarks, I'll leave you with this for someone who is watching. And these are tips on discussing puberty with your children. These are for parents. The first one is use actual body part language for private parts. Parents, stop telling your children that this one is a donut here, this one is what. No. Use the actual language, because this is how pedophiles and this is how predators get to them, because you're not using the actual language. Why are you ashamed? Why are you ashamed of these things? Anyway, I'm on TV. Moving on, the next one is keep things short when talking to younger children, especially depending on how old they are or their level of understanding. You do not want to escalate things, and just keep it short. Say this is bad, this is good, and keep it at that level. The next one is use day-to-day situations to trigger conversation. Kids will ask questions. The third is do not wait to have that talk. It's never too early. Kids are getting exposed to these topics in school and on TV, and a lot sooner than you think. The next one is puberty is a normal part of growing up. Remember that, and remind your kids that there isn't anything wrong with changes going on in their bodies. However, last remarks.
My last remarks. Well, unfortunately or fortunately, got into a world that is getting so diversified because of globalization. Back then, parents used to read from the same script. That is why one would be comfortable sending her daughter to the auntie, because she knew the auntie was nurtured the way she was nurtured. But right now, we are surrounded by people from all sorts of cultures, from all corners of the world. So you never know what Siobhan believes in. You never know what Aggie believes in. And you never know what Brian believes in. So if you send your daughter to Brian, or your son to Brian, Brian might tell your son that it is okay to have sex at 13 or have sex at 22. So you never know what they believe in. Right now, we just have to get direct with our children and not, I agree with you, we don't have to take them to other people, because you can have your uncle that grew up in the US and believes in the same things that Jada Pinkett believes in, or your auntie. So we're not all reading from the same script anymore.
Yeah.
So it has to be you and your child. What you believe in, nurture them that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How about you, Aggie?
For me, basically, I'd like to talk about parents. They should be able to create a safe space and safe haven for their children to be able to talk to them about anything and everything in regard to puberty, in regard to the changes in their bodies, as well as sex education. Because you want your child to get the information from you. At least for me, that's what I would want. I don't want my child to get information from the nanny, to get information from other people on the outside. So just like the saying, charity begins at home, it's not just a saying, it's actually true. So create that safe haven for your children to be able to confide in you in case of anything, and also ask you all the questions that they need to know.
Absolutely. Well, for me, I will end by citing this to the children. The children between the ages of 8, it could be 7, regardless of the period, regardless of your age group, as long as you're in the stage where you're going through puberty, I need you to understand that it can't be the same for everyone. You will have different moments when you grow a beard. If you don't grow, it is okay. It doesn't make you less of a man. It is okay for a girl if your breasts have not yet fully developed. It doesn't make you less of a woman. It is okay not to have hips. Up to now, I also still don't have hips. So it is okay. Do not feel bad. No. Yes, of course, exactly. And actually, some of these things are genetic. So you have no reason to feel less of a person just because you haven't gone through some of these stages. So for me, it's basically to the little boys and to the little girls out there that haven't experienced some of these things that we've been talking about. It doesn't make you less of a human being. You're very normal. Some of these things are genetic. Some of them were never meant to happen. It is okay. And that winds up what we had for you this morning on The Conversation in Our Views. Keep watching Sunrise at Sea.
You are still watching Sunrise at Sea here on CTV. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. It's been great having you on the show. And remember, you can always connect with us on our social media platforms. That is Instagram, Twitter, Facebook at CTV Uganda. And if you ever miss out on any episodes, you can be sure to catch up on our YouTube channel at CTV Uganda. Well, from me, the lady and the gentleman and the entire team, we wish you a wonderful Wednesday.